Hello and welcome to She Rises. This is a podcast for Christian women who love God and want their hearts and homes shaped by truth, not just good intentions. In this series, we're exploring faith in real motherhood, not idealised or polished, but lived out in ordinary days where children need you and routines repeat and prayer sometimes feels quieter than you expected. I'm Johanne Hewlett, and I'm so glad you're here today. Now, there's a particular strain that settles into motherhood when you're praying sincerely and you're not yet seeing anything. Nothing seems to shift. You bring the same concern before God day after day, and you ask for wisdom in a situation that feels complex. You pray for patience in yourself, growth in your child, clarity in a decision that doesn't feel straightforward, and life continues in its usual rhythm. There's no dramatic answers, no sudden breakthroughs, just the steady unfolding of ordinary days. At first, you may not even notice the disappointment, but over time, a subtle question begins to rise. Is he listening? Not in a dramatic faith crisis way, but in a quieter, more vulnerable way. You expected, at the very least, a sense of reassurance, some inner confirmation that your prayers were landing somewhere. And when that reassurance, it doesn't come through, the silence can feel heavier than you anticipated. Motherhood has a way of amplifying that weight because so much feels urgent and so much feels consequential. When your prayers involve your children, waiting feels intense. You're not simply praying about abstract circumstances, you're actually praying about hearts and habits and patterns and futures, and the quiet can feel long. Now, Psalm 13 begins with words that many Christian women have thought privately, but hesitate to voice out loud. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? It's an honest question. David does not disguise his confusion behind polished language. He doesn't rush to tidy his emotion before approaching God. He names the ache directly. How long will this tension continue? How long will it feel unresolved? And there's something deeply relieving about the fact that Scripture preserves that question. God is not threatened by honest lament. He doesn't recoil from it. But what has always struck me about Psalm 13 is not only the lament, but the movement within it. His circumstances do not visibly improve within the psalm itself. What shifts is his posture. He chooses to trust in God's unfailing love and to remember that God has been faithful before. The silence remains. Trust grows within it. Now, that movement is not emotional, it is deliberate. And in motherhood, that deliberate trust is often what faith looks like. Now, there have been seasons when I've prayed consistently about something in one of my children's lives and seen very little outward change. It wasn't crisis or chaos, it was something subtler, a pattern I longed to see soften, a tendency I hoped would mature more quickly. And I would pray in small pockets of the day while tidying or driving, waiting or folding laundry. The prayers were not eloquent, they were simple, repetitive. And slowly the temptation crept in to manage more tightly, to step in more quickly, to adjust, correct, oversee and refine until perhaps I could produce growth I was longing to see myself. But motherhood teaches us that not everything yields to management. Some growth happens in hidden places. Roots extend downward long before fruit appears above ground. The absence of visible change does not mean the absence of God's work. It may mean that his work is deeper than we expected. One of the most stabilizing truths that we must hold on to is that silence is not the same as abandonment. The silence we fear is the silence of indifference, and the silence we often experience is the silence of patience. There are seasons when God strengthens endurance rather than altering circumstances, and there's times when he works quietly in another person's heart while asking us to remain faithful in ours. There's moments when trust itself is being refined, not because he delights in withholding comfort, but because he desires something sturdier than emotional reassurance. Motherhood confronts our desire for measurable progress. We like evidence, we like feedback, and we like to see that our prayers are effective. But Scripture shows us again and again that much of God's work unfolds gradually and often invisibly. The cross itself looked like divine silence before it revealed resurrection power. Waiting did not mean absence, it meant preparation. Remaining anchored when God feels silent does not require dramatic declarations of faith. It requires steadiness. It means continuing to bring the same prayer before him without demanding a timeline. It means choosing obedience in small daily moments, even when the larger outcome remains uncertain. And it means resisting the urge to seize control simply because waiting feels uncomfortable. Anchoring is not passive, it's active trust. It is waking up and choosing again to believe that God's character is not altered by your current circumstances. It's allowing his faithfulness in the past to steady you now in the present. And often that kind of quiet faith shapes us more deeply than immediate answers ever could. Now, if you're listening and recognizing that your faith feels stretched thin this season, not broken, but maybe tired, then Rise and Restore was created for exactly that space. It is not about dramatic reinvention. It is about strengthening your thinking and realigning your heart with truth when circumstances feel unclear. Inside Rise and Restore, we walk through identity, alignment, and steady spiritual rebuilding in a structured way that supports you without overwhelming you. And if you feel ready to move from simply enduring silence to becoming anchored within it, and I would love to invite you into it. You can find all the details in the show notes, and you can use the code podcast for 25% off. If now is not the time, stay with the series, but if you do sense the nudge, then don't ignore it. Speaking of nudges, this week's gentle nudge is this. If you find yourself asking, "How long, Lord?" this week, allow yourself to bring that question honestly into prayer. Don't rush past it. And before you finish praying, name one truth about God's character that remains steady: his faithfulness, his patience, his mercy. Let trust grow quietly alongside the waiting. Next week, we'll talk about setbacks, those moments in motherhood when things unravel despite your best intentions, and grace must meet disappointment. Until next time, walk faithfully, rest properly, and rise steadily.